Have you ever taken a cab at 3 a.m.? Not the kind with soft jazz and polite small talk. I'm talking about the night shift in Veridian City, where the meter starts ticking before the passenger gets in, where anyone waving with both hands should never be picked up, and where someone in your back seat might just vanish mid-ride. My name's Leo. I used to drive cab 37, and if you're brave enough to stay through this story, remember the 3 rules, because once you forget, you might become the next fare that never makes it home. 3M. Rain slicked the streets of Veridian City, turning the neon signs of dive bars and shuttered pawn shops into bleeding watercolor reflections on the asphalt. Another fare dropped off in the sanitized silence of the financial district. Another handful of miles clocked on the meter. Another hour closer to a dawn that felt impossibly far away. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but plans have a nasty habit of unraveling, don't they? Now, there was just the night shift, the worn vinyl seat of cab 307, the endless loop of rain-streaked streets, and the ghosts. Not always literal ghosts, mind you. Mostly just the ghosts of better days, unpaid bills, and bad decisions. Why drive nights? People ask sometimes. The drunk ones mostly, spilling their guts in the back seat like I'm some four-wheeled confessor. Insomnia, I usually tell them. Partly true. Sleep doesn't come easy when your brain won't stop replaying the crash, the sirens, the look on her face. Easier to just stay awake, keep moving, let the city lights blur into hypnotic streaks. Keep the thoughts at bay. Easier to hide in the anonymity of the graveyard shift, ferrying the city's other nocturnal creatures from one pool of light to the next. And yeah, the money can't outrun debt, even driving all night. Cab 307 is my world. Smells faintly of stale cigarette smoke. Mine. Cheap cherry air freshener. Policy. And the ghosts of 1,000 passengers. Cheap perfume. Spilled beer. Wet wool. Desperation. The meter glows with its cold, judgmental numbers. The dispatch radio crackles constantly. A low hiss punctuated by Brenda's bored voice calling out addresses. A fragile lifeline in the urban static. Outside, the city breathes its own rhythm. Distant sirens. The rumble of unseen trains. The sudden clatter from a dark alleyway. The whisper of tires on wet pavement. It's a lonely existence, but predictable. Mostly, except for the rules. I found the car tucked into the sun visor when I first got assigned 307 6 months ago. Laminated, grimy, edges softened with wear. Typed on an old typewriter, slightly crooked. Night shift Veridian City cabs, unofficial advisory, unofficial. Right. Never pick up anyone waving with both hands. Seemed weird. Desperate, maybe. Why refuse someone clearly needing a ride? Unless that desperation wasn't human. I'd seen people frantic in the rain before, but both hands, like they were trying to grab onto something solid before dissolving. I'd shrugged it off then. Probably some driver's inside joke. If the meter starts before they enter, cancel the ride. Immediately. This one felt odder. Meter glitches happen, sure. But the urgency. Cancel immediately. Like letting it run acknowledged something already in the car with you. Something unseen that had already claimed the space. Still, probably just superstition. Avoiding phantom fares or system errors. If your passenger disappears before drop-off, don't stop driving. Complete the route. This was the one that made the hair on my neck prickle. Even then. Disappears? From a locked car. The impossibility of it was chilling. And the instruction, don't stop. Keep driving. Pretend nothing happened. Ignore the impossible emptiness in the back seat. Ignore the cold spot. Ignore the sudden silence. What were you driving away from if you didn't stop? What happened if you did? Did you join them? Did it get you too? It reminded me too much of that night on the highway. The twisting metal, not stopping soon enough. I shoved the card back in the visor, told myself it was bullshit. veteran drivers messing with the new guy, but 6 months driving the Veridian night shift. You see things. Things that make the rules seem less like a joke and more like a grim survival guide. Figures standing just a little too still under buzzing streetlights. Faces glimpsed in alleyways that don't look quite right. Fares asking to be dropped off at addresses that turn out to be derelict lots or cemetery gates. And the radio. Sometimes the static sounds less like static and more like whispering. Tonight, the rain adds another layer of gloom. The streets are mostly deserted. My phone buzzes. A fare request, few blocks over, Hawthorne Street. Not the best neighborhood, but the fare's legit. I accept, the GPS painting a blue line on my screen. As I pull away from the curb, my headlights catch something down a side street. A figure, half hidden by overflowing bins, waving frantically, with both hands. My stomach clenches. Just a trick of the light, the rain. Had to be. I keep driving, eyes fixed forward, heart rate kicking up a notch. I reach Hawthorne, pull up outside a dilapidated brownstone. Rain lashes down. The porch light is out. Nobody there. Great, I mutter, ready to hit no show. Click. I freeze. The sound is soft but distinct. From the console beside me, the meter. The fare light is on. The numbers start ticking up slowly. $3.50. $3.60. My car's empty. I haven't even put it in park. Rule 2. Cancel the ride. Immediately. My hand darts out. Finger stabbing the cancel button on the dispatch screen. Confirm cancellation. Yes. The meter clicks off. The fare light dies. Silence. Except for the rain and my own suddenly loud breathing. A blast of unnaturally cold air swirls through the cab, raising goosebumps on my arms despite the heater being on. I don't wait. Shifting into drive, I pull away from the dark brownstone, tires squealing slightly on the wet pavement. I glance in the rearview mirror. Just the empty back seat, rain streaming down the rear window. But for a split second, was that a pale face reflected there? Looking out, gone before I could be sure. Just stress, I tell myself. Lack of sleep. The damn rules getting in my head. But my hands are shaking on the wheel. The radio crackles. Brenda's voice comes through, clear for once. Cab 307. Got another fare for you. Corner of Willow and Cypress. Passenger waiting. Willow and Cypress, right near the old asylum grounds. My gut clenches again. Roger that dispatch, I say, trying to keep my voice even. 307 en route. I signal. Turn the corner, heading towards the next gamble. The next shadow. The city stretches out before me. Wet, dark, and filled with secrets. And the rules whisper at the back of my mind. The night is far from over. Roger that. Dispatch, I said, the words feeling stiff, unnatural in my own mouth. 307 en route. Pulling away from the curb where the meter had spooked me felt like tearing something. The brownstone remained dark, inert, offering no explanation. Had that cold spot in the back seat faded? I couldn't be sure. My skin still prickled. I cranked the heater up another notch, more for the illusion of control than any real warmth. Willow and Cypress. The address wasn't just near the old Veridian asylum grounds. It was practically on them. The main asylum building, a sprawling Victorian Gothic monstrosity, had been shuttered for decades. A black skeleton looming on the hill, overlooking the river, surrounded by acres of overgrown parkland that bordered this corner. Locals avoided it, especially after dark. It wasn't just derelict, it was unlucky. Stories clung to it like the kudzu strangling its stone walls. Whispers of former patients seen wandering the grounds, strange lights, sounds carrying on the wind. And now I had a fare waiting there at nearly 4 a.m, in the rain. Fantastic. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel as I drove. The rain was letting up slightly, but fog drifted in thick banks off the river, swirling under the infrequent streetlights, muffling sound. The usual city hum felt distant here, replaced by the drip of water from unseen eaves and the sigh of wind through the overgrown asylum trees. My radio hissed, the static seeming louder, deeper. Just my imagination, had to be. But the image of that pale face I thought I'd seen reflected in the rearview mirror earlier. It lingered. I reached the corner of Willow and Cypress. It was darker here, one streetlight completely out, the other flickering erratically. The wrought iron fence surrounding the asylum grounds loomed just across the street, ornate and rusted, half swallowed by shadows and fog. And standing beneath the flickering streetlight, solitary and still, was my fare. A woman. Slim, wearing a simple dark coat that looked inadequate for the damp chill. Her face was turned away from me initially, looking up towards the dark bulk of the asylum on the hill. Even from the car, I felt a ripple of unease. There was something about her stillness, her isolation on this deserted corner, that felt staged, deliberate. I pulled up, flicking on the interior light, hitting the button to unlock the rear door. She turned slowly, and my breath caught. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair plastered to her forehead by the damp. Her face was pale, strikingly beautiful in the stark light, but dominated by large dark eyes that seemed to absorb the flickering streetlight without reflecting it. She looked lost and profoundly sad. She opened the door and slid into the back seat without a word, pulling the door shut with a soft click. The scent that wafted in with her wasn't perfume. It was cold rain, damp earth, and something else faint and floral, like crushed petals. "Where to?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Her dark eyes met mine briefly, expressionless, before flicking away to stare out the side window. "The Blackwood Theater," she said, her voice soft, barely audible above the engine and the rain. "Downtown. The Blackwood. Another Veridian landmark steeped in morbid history. An old vaudeville house, supposedly haunted since a fire tragically killed a dozen performers back in the 30s. Now mostly used for indie film screenings and occasional goth nights. A long drive, across town, through some of the city's lonelier stretches. More time for my nerves to fray. "Okay," I said, putting the car in drive. The meter clicked on reassuringly after she was inside. Small mercies. I pulled away from the curb, leaving the flickering streetlight and the dark asylum grounds behind us. The first part of the drive was silent, broken only by the rhythmic slap of the wipers and the constant hiss of the radio. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. She sat perfectly still, staring out at the rain-streaked cityscape blurring past. The deserted warehouses of the industrial district. The sodium yellow glow over the empty docklands. The dark ribbon of the river. She didn't shiver, despite the apparent thinness of her coat. The cold spot I'd felt earlier seemed to be creeping back into the car, radiating subtly from the back seat. Long night. I tried, needing to break the silence, needing confirmation she was real, solid. She didn't respond for a long moment. Then, still looking out the window, she whispered, "They're all long." Her voice sent another shiver down my spine. It wasn't just sad. It held a chilling weariness, an ancient exhaustion. I didn't try making conversation again. We were driving through the warehouse district now. Long blocks of dark brick buildings and shuttered loading docks. The rain heavier again. The streetlights here were few and far between. Ahead, the road dipped into a short underpass beneath the elevated train line. A tunnel of deeper darkness. As we entered the underpass, the radio static suddenly intensified, drowning out the wipers, the rain, everything. It wasn't just static. It felt thick, electric, almost painful. My teeth buzzed. The lights inside the underpass flickered erratically, casting strobing shadows within the cab and through the static. Just for a second I heard it. A faint snatch of melody, a mournful fiddle tune, cutting through the noise before being swallowed again. Rule 1? Was it starting again? My eyes flick instinctively to the rearview mirror, checking on my passenger, checking her reaction to the radio. The back seat was empty. Utterly, completely empty. 1 second she had been there, a pale silhouette against the rain-streaked window. The next, gone, vanished, from a locked car doing 40 miles an hour in a concrete underpass. Ice flooded my veins. My foot jerked towards the brake pedal. Stop, figure this out. Where did she go? How? Rule 3. If your passenger disappears before drop-off, don't stop driving. The rule slammed into my consciousness, cold and absolute. Don't stop. Don't acknowledge it. Pretend she's still there. Don't acknowledge it. Complete the route. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard it hurt. My breath hitched. The urge to stop, to pull over right there in the echoing darkness of the underpass, to turn on the light, to search the empty seat, was overwhelming. It defied logic, defied sanity, to just keep going. What if I hit the brakes and she reappeared? What if stopping invited whatever took her, or whatever she was, to turn its attention fully on me? Don't stop driving. Don't stop driving! My foot eased off the brake, pressed down hard on the accelerator. The cruiser surged forward, engine roaring, exiting the underpass back into the rain-lashed deserted street. My eyes were locked forward, knuckles white on the wheel. I didn't look in the mirror again. Couldn't. The back seat felt like a block of ice. The silence from behind me was profound, deeper than just emptiness. I could almost feel the imprint of where she had sat, a void radiating cold. Did I hear a faint whisper, like dry leaves skittering across glass right behind my head? Imagination. Had to be. I drove, following the GPS route towards the Blackwood Theater, mile after agonizing mile, through empty intersections where red lights glowed like malevolent eyes, past rows of dark houses where unseen people slept, oblivious. The city felt alien, hostile. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every distant siren sounded like a warning aimed directly at me. Finally, the GPS announced, "You have arrived." The Blackwood Theater loomed ahead, its ornate facade dark and rain-streaked, gargoyles seeming to grimace under the streetlights. The street was completely deserted. I pulled over to the curb, engine idling, hands shaking so badly I could barely put the car in park. The meter glowed on the console, $27.80, for a passenger who wasn't there, who had vanished into thin air miles back. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the glowing numbers, the rain drumming on the roof, the empty back seat radiating cold through the thin partition. The silence in the cab felt immense, suffocating. What now? Clear the meter. Drive away. File a report about what? A fare dissolving into thin air. My eyes fell on the passenger side floor in the back, visible in the dim glow from the streetlights. Something small and dark lay there. Something that hadn't been there before she got in. Leaning over, heart pounding. I could just make it out. A single, wilted, rain-darkened lily. The wilted lily lay on the floor mat like a small, dark accusation. Rainwater clung to its bruised petals. It smelled faintly of cold earth and something else. That cloying, funereal sweetness I'd smelled near the asylum, now trapped in the close confines of the cab. Bile rose in my throat again. Proof. Impossible. Terrifying proof that the woman in the back seat hadn't just been a quiet fare. She had been wrong, and she had vanished into thin air, leaving only this morbid token behind. My eyes flicked to the glowing meter. $27.80, a debt owed by a ghost. Shaking, I fumbled with the dispatch tablet, thumb hovering over the complete fare button. What other choice was there? Report a vanishing passenger. Get laughed off the radio, maybe sent for psych evaluation. No, The rules, spoken or unspoken, dictated silence, denial, pretend it didn't happen. I hit complete, the system likely charging it to some phantom account or eating the cost itself. I didn't care which. The meter zeroed out. The fare light went off. But the emptiness in the back seat felt louder than ever. I couldn't stay parked outside the Blackwood. Its dark facade seemed to watch me, the gargoyles sneering. Putting the car in drive, I pulled away slowly, joints stiff, muscles aching with residual tension. I drove aimlessly for a while, through the rain-slicked downtown streets, past darkened office buildings and shuttered cafes. I kept the interior light off, refusing to look in the rearview mirror, refusing to check the back seat. The cold spot lingered, a palpable presence just behind my head. Did I hear a faint sigh, like settling dust or shifting fabric? Was the scent of lilies stronger again? I cranked the radio, filling the cab with meaningless pop music. Anything to drown out the silence in my own frantic thoughts. But you can't outrun something that's already inside your head. Images flashed. The woman's dark, empty eyes, the impossible emptiness of the seat, the single, wilting lily, and Rule 3, a cold, hard imperative: don't stop driving. I hadn't stopped. I'd followed the rule, but it offered no comfort. Only the chilling confirmation that the impossible was real, and I was trapped driving circles around it. My carefully constructed numbness, the shield I used to get through the nights, the one I'd built after the accident, after Sarah left, it was cracking. The grief and guilt I drove endless miles to outrun felt closer now, stirred up by the phantom passenger, by the station's uncanny ability to reflect my own inner desolation. Was this city feeding on it? Were these fares drawn to it? I needed to talk to someone. Not the cops, not a shrink. Someone who knew. Someone who understood the unofficial advisory. Sal Steady Romano had been driving Veridian nights since the dinosaurs roamed, or so the joke went. He was a fixture at the depot garage, usually found nursing lukewarm coffee in the grimy break room between fares, smelling faintly of diesel and cheap cigars, his face a roadmap of busted capillaries and weary cynicism. He'd been the one during my first week who'd pulled me aside after seeing me almost pick up a fare near the old docks, who was waving just a little too energetically. He hadn't mentioned the rules explicitly, just grunted. Some folks out here, they ain't really looking for a ride, kid. Just looking, learning not to see. It was the closest thing to guidance I'd gotten. I found him around 5 a.m., parked near the all-night diner by the rail yards, steam rising from a paper cup perched on his dashboard. I pulled up alongside his cab, rolled down the window. Rain had eased to a drizzle. Rough one? Sal asked, his voice raspy, not looking away from the desolate street. He didn't miss much. You could say that. I managed. I hesitated, unsure how to phrase it. Sal, you ever have a fare just disappear? You ever have a fare? He took a long, slow drag from his cigarette, the orange tip glowing in the dim cab light. He blew the smoke out deliberately before answering. Rule 3, kid, he asked quietly, his eyes finally flicking towards me, sharp and knowing beneath hooded lids. My blood went cold. He knew the number. He knew the rule. Yeah, I whispered. Rule 3. Sal nodded slowly, looking back out at the street. Happens, he grunted. Less now than it used to, maybe. Or maybe drivers just don't talk about it no more. He took another drag. Picked up a woman once years ago. Near Blackwood, matter of fact. Pretty thing, sad eyes. Vanished halfway across the bridge. Middle of the night, car locked tight. He tapped ash out the window. Felt like I drove through a block of ice afterwards. What did you do? I asked, leaning closer. What do you think? Sal scoffed, though there was no humor in it. Kept driving. Finished the route. Cleared the meter. Went home. Drank myself stupid. Came back the next night. He shrugged. Rules there for a reason, kid. You stop. You look too close. Maybe you find out where they went. Maybe you go with him. Maybe something else gets in while the door's open. And we're finding out. But what are they, Sal? I pressed. Where do they come from? He gave me a long, tired look. Does it matter? Ghosts, glitches, city bleeding through from somewhere else. Call them what you want. They're part of the night shift. Part of the job. You follow the rules. You drive safe. You mind your own business. Maybe you last. You start asking questions. Start looking too hard. Well, he crushed out his cigarette in the overflowing ashtray. Carson asked too many questions. Nice kid. Didn't last 6 months. Carson? I vaguely remembered the name from the shift roster when I started. Quiet guy. Transferred out, they said. Or maybe not. Just like the deputy in that other nightmare. Stop it, Leo. So just ignore it? I asked, frustration mixing with the fear. You don't ignore it, Sal corrected, his voice flat. You respect it. You follow the damn rules like they're gospel. 'Cause out here after midnight, they pretty much are. Don't pick up trouble. Don't invite it in. And if it gets in anyway, you sure as hell don't stop to ask it questions. He started his engine. Go home, kid. Get some sleep if you can. And clean out your cab. Sometimes they leave things. He pulled away, leaving me sitting there in the gray pre-dawn light. The drizzle starting again. His words offered no comfort, only confirmation of the grim reality. No explanations, just rules for survival. Clean out your cab. My eyes drifted to the back floor mat. The lily wasn't there. I froze, then frantically scanned the entire back seat, heart pounding. Nothing. No flower. Had I imagined it? Did Sal's words make me doubt what I saw? Or did it vanish too? Then I saw it. Not on the floor. On the back of the passenger seat, tucked into the seam of the worn vinyl, almost hidden. A single, dark, wilted petal. And stuck to it something small and pale. A single strand of long, dark hair. She hadn't just vanished. She had left more than a flower. She had left a piece of herself. Or maybe a claim. My shift was over, but as I drove back towards my empty apartment, the rising sun hidden behind a wall of gray cloud, I knew this wasn't just a job anymore. I was caught in something, marked by it, and the rules felt less like a shield, and more like the bars of a cage. I was driving myself around it. The single dark petal and strand of hair sat in a small plastic evidence bag I'd instinctively grabbed from my glove compartment. Now parked under the buzzing fluorescent lights of the deserted depot garage between shifts, I stared at it. Tangible proof. Proof that defied locked doors and the laws of physics. Proof that Sal wasn't just a cynical old-timer spinning yarns. He was a survivor relaying the bare, terrifying facts. Proof that I wasn't just stressed or sleep-deprived. I was interfacing with something impossible. I almost threw the bag away a dozen times. Part of me screamed to get rid of it, to sever the connection. But another part, the part that needed answers, the part that felt fundamentally altered since that ride, couldn't let it go. It felt like a clue, or maybe bait. I tucked the bag deep into my jacket pocket, the faint, cold wrongness of it, a constant reminder against my hip. The following nights were a new kind of hell. Sleep became a battlefield. I jolt awake from nightmares filled with empty back seats, cold floral scents, and the echo of a meter clicking ominously in an empty car. Driving felt like navigating a minefield. Every potential fare, waving felt like a threat. Was it one hand or two? I found myself squinting into the darkness, second-guessing, sometimes driving past legitimate fares out of sheer paranoia. Every time the meter lit up, my heart leaped, scanning the empty seats before the customer even opened the door. Rule 2 was now a constant low-grade hum of anxiety. The city itself felt different, hostile. The familiar streets seemed to hold more shadows than usual. Reflections in shop windows sometimes showed my cab with someone indistinct in the back seat for a split second before resolving back to empty vinyl. The radio became an enemy. Static felt heavy, listening. Snippets of melody. Sometimes the mournful blues, sometimes just discordant notes, would bleed through the chatter for a moment before vanishing. I started driving with it off more often, preferring the drone of the engine and the rain to the constant tension of waiting for a trigger. But the silence wasn't much better. It felt thin, ready to break into that other silence, the one I'd fled from near the asylum. My research hit dead ends. The Blackwood theater fire was well documented, but held no clues related to vanishing passengers. City urban legends were plentiful. Ghost lights on the old bridge, the lady in white who hailed cabs near the reservoir, but nothing matched my specific experiences. Nothing explained the rules. I even tried looking up the history of Cab 307 itself. Records were patchy. It was an older car, had passed through several drivers. One previous driver, Ramirez, had quit abruptly a year ago. No reason given. Another, further back, had been involved in a fatal single-car accident on the waterfront, ruled as driver error due to fatigue. Or something else. I cornered Sal again during a shared coffee break at a greasy spoon that smelled of burnt oil and regret. I didn't mention the petal or the hair, just pressed him harder about vanishing fares, about Rule 3. He stirred his coffee, avoiding my eyes. Told you, kid. It happens. You keep driving. But why? I insisted, leaning forward. What happens if you stop? Did anyone ever stop? Sal sighed, the sound rattling in his chest. Heard stories. Never saw it myself. He finally looked at me, his eyes dark and serious. Heard about a driver, name of Mackie, years back. Said his fare vanished over the West End Bridge. Mackie slammed on the brakes right there, middle of the bridge, got out looking. Caused a pileup. Cops found Mackie wandering down by the piers later. Soaked, hypothermic, talking nonsense about joining her in the cold. And the river needing its due. Never drove again. Barely spoke again. Last I heard. Sal shook his head. You don't stop, Leo. You just don't. His words hung heavy in the air. Don't stop, or you end up like Mackie, lost to the cold in the river. Or like Carson, the deputy from that other life. Focus, Leo. Or like Ramirez, just vanishing from the roster. That night, the rain returned, thick and relentless, turning the city into a maze of slick streets and distorted reflections. I was cruising slowly through the old Docklands, a notoriously bleak and deserted area after dark, all abandoned warehouses and rusting gantries. My app pinged. A fare, pickup, Pier 12, destination, Cypress Hills Cemetery across town. My blood ran cold. Pier 12 was derelict, fenced off, and Cypress Hills, Christ. But the app showed a name. Eliza, our same initial as the Blackwood fare. Coincidence? Or a summons? Every instinct screamed to reject it. Sal's warning, Mackie's fate, the cold dread pooling in my gut. But the name, Eliza, and the memory of that profound sadness in her eyes. What if she was trapped? What if stopping was the only way to understand, to break the cycle? The thought was insane, reckless, born of exhaustion and fear, but it took root. Maybe confronting it head on was better than waiting for it to keep chipping away at my sanity. Screw the rules, I muttered, hitting accept on the app before I could change my mind. I turned the cab towards the dark, rain-swept piers, the GPS painting a blue line towards a place I knew I shouldn't go. The radio crackled, then settled into a low, persistent hiss. The air in the cab felt heavy, charged. I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the small plastic bag containing the wilted petal and the single strand of dark hair. Evidence, or an invitation. Tonight, maybe I'd find out which. Pier 12 was even worse up close than I remembered. The chain-link fence was partially collapsed, festooned with weeds and garbage. Beyond it, the old wooden pier stretched out into the black, churning water of the river. Planks missing, pilings listing drunkenly. The air hung thick with the smell of brine, creosote, and decay. Rain hammered down, blurring the dim lights from the distant Port Authority buildings. No sane person would be waiting here, but someone was. Standing near the landward end of the pier, just beyond the collapsed fence line, was a solitary figure. Feminine silhouette, dark coat, head bowed against the rain. Eliza. It had to be. Taking a deep breath that tasted like river mud and dread, I pulled the cab over, engine idling rough. I didn't unlock the doors yet, just watched her. She didn't move, didn't look up, just stood there in the downpour like a statue carved from sorrow. Was this a trap? Almost certainly, but I'd accepted the fare. I had to see this through. I hit the unlock button. The rear door opened slowly. She slid inside, bringing a blast of cold, damp air and the scent of rain, river water, and faintly, lilies. She pulled the door shut. Her dark hair was plastered to her pale face, water dripping from the ends. Her eyes, when she finally looked up and met mine in the rearview mirror, were vast, dark pools, holding an impossible depth of sadness. Cypress Hills, she whispered, her voice the same soft, barely audible murmur. I nodded, unable to speak, putting the car in drive. The meter clicked on. Normal. For now. I pulled away from the pier, back onto the deserted Docklands Road. The silence in the cab was thick, broken only by the rain and the wipers. This time, I didn't try small talk. I just drove, hyper-aware of her presence behind me, the unnatural cold radiating from the back seat. The radio hissed quietly. You came back, she murmured after several minutes, still looking out the window. You requested a ride, I replied, keeping my voice level, eyes on the road. Not many drivers come out to the piers anymore, she said, especially not Pier 12. A pause. They say it's haunted. Is it? I asked, risking a glance in the mirror. Her eyes met mine again, holding them this time. No sadness now, just a profound, ancient emptiness. Everything is haunted, Leo. She whispered, some places just show it more openly. She knew my name. Of course she did. The radio crackled louder. A distorted snatch of bluesy music, mournful harmonica, slide guitar, played for 3 seconds, then dissolved into static. Rule 1 trigger. My hand instinctively went to the dial. But Eliza spoke again, her voice cutting through the hiss. Don't, she said softly. It doesn't like being interrupted. I froze. The static intensified, then through it came a voice. Not Mom's this time. A man's voice, rough, panicked. Help. Anyone? Car went off the bridge. West End. Water's rising. Can't open the door. Please. It sounded terrifyingly real. Don't answer that either, Eliza murmured, her gaze fixed on me in the mirror. He made his choice. Stopped on the bridge. Mackie. It had to be Mackie's last call, echoing through time, through the static. Rule 2. My blood ran cold. Who are you? I demanded, my voice shaking. Eliza smiled faintly, a flicker of sorrow returning. Just a passenger, like you, Leo. Stuck on a route you can't get off. She looked out the window again. We're almost there. We were approaching the old warehouse district again, heading towards the bridge Sal had mentioned. Rain sluiced down the windshield. Then, just as we reached the bridge entrance, Eliza sighed, a sound like dry leaves crumbling. My stop, she whispered. This isn't Cypress Hills, I said, confused. Close enough. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. Rule 3. Don't stop driving. But she'd spoken. She'd indicated this was her stop. And Sal's story. Mackie stopping on the bridge. My foot hovered over the brake. Don't stop. Keep driving. Finish the route. The rule screamed at me. Sal's warning echoed. Mackie's fate. But Eliza's words? Just a passenger, like you. And the look in her eyes. Was this the way out? Did stopping here, where Mackie failed, change something? Or was it the final trap? Screw the rules. Screw Sal. Screw waiting to become another ghost in the machine. I slammed on the brakes. The taxi fishtailed wildly on the wet pavement, screeching to a halt halfway onto the bridge. The engine sputtered and died. Silence. Not the Rule 3 silence this time, just the sudden absence of the engine, leaving only the drumming rain and the frantic pounding of my own heart. The back seat remained empty. The cold, however, intensified dramatically, fogging the inside of the windows instantly. "Okay, Eliza," I shouted, voice cracking, spinning around in my seat to face the empty back. "You wanted me to stop?" I stopped. "What happens now? What do you want?" The car doors locked simultaneously with heavy echoing chunks. The interior lights flickered, died, plunging the cab into near darkness, lit only by the distant city glow reflecting off the rain and fog outside. The cold became biting, painful. Frost started crawling across the inside of the windshield, and from the empty back seat came a low chuckle. Not Eliza's soft voice. This was harsh, grating, ancient. "You stopped," the voice rasped, seeming to come from the vinyl seat itself. "You looked. You acknowledged. Foolish. Now, you get to see where she went, where all the fares go when they leave early." The darkness in the back seat deepened, coalesced. It wasn't empty anymore. Something was taking shape. Something vast and cold and made of shadow and river water and forgotten sorrows. Tendrils of black fog snaked over the front seats. The smell of decay and lilies filled the air, thick and suffocating. I fumbled for the door handle. Locked tight. I slammed my fist against the window. Solid. Trapped. The shape in the back seat laughed again, a sound like stones grinding together underwater. The last thing I saw before the darkness completely filled the cab was a pair of pale, empty eyes, reflecting the distant city lights like dead stars, fixing on mine with cold, triumphant hunger. The blackness pressing in wasn't just absence of light. It was thick, heavy, crushing. It filled my lungs, my head, carrying the stench of the river bottom, cold mud, decaying vegetation, unimaginable depths. Flashes burned behind my eyelids. Eliza's sad eyes turning empty and vast. The impossible geometry of the backwoods walker. The smooth, terrifying blankness of the faceless entity. The frantic waving of hands that promised only oblivion. And underneath it all, the grating, ancient voice from the back seat, whispering promises of where the lost fares go. It felt like drowning, pulled down into cold, lightless water, the pressure building, my sanity fraying like rotten rope. Then light. Not the train's sickly green or the city's neon, but the pale, watery gray of approaching dawn, filtering weakly through the frosted windshield. The crushing pressure vanished, the horrific smell receded, leaving only the mundane sense of wet vinyl and stale coffee. The intense cold lessened, the frost on the windows beginning to melt into streaks of condensation. Silence, but this time, it was natural. Outside, I could hear the faint rumble of the bridge structure, the distant sound of an early morning truck on the highway, the relentless drumming of the rain easing slightly. The entity in the back seat was gone. A violent tremor shook my body. I gasped, choked, then fumbled blindly for the door handle. Locked, of course. Panic surged again, but as my fingers brushed the electronic lock switch, there was a soft click. Unlocked. I scrambled out, falling onto the wet, gritty pavement of the bridge, gulping lungfuls of cold, damp air. My stomach heaved, but there was nothing left to throw up. I lay there for a moment, cheek pressed against the cold ground, rain plastering my hair to my face, just breathing. Alive, shaking, traumatized, maybe irrevocably broken, but alive. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself up. My whole body ached. Looking back at the cab, Unit 3 and 7, it seemed diminished. The headlights were off, the engine dead silent. The windows were streaked with condensation, obscuring the interior. Did I dare look inside? Walking on trembling legs, I peered through the driver's side window. Empty. Backseat empty. No lily petal. No strand of hair. No lingering presence. Just worn vinyl seats and the faint smell of cherry air freshener. Had it all been a hallucination? Had it all been a hallucination? A breakdown brought on by stress, grief, and too many sleepless nights? No. The memory of the cold, the voice, the pressure was too real. And the car, the electrical system was completely dead. No lights, no radio, no ignition. The entity, whatever it was, had drained it, used it, left it a husk. Dawn was breaking properly now, painting the clouds above the river in shades of bruised purple and dirty orange. Early morning traffic started to appear on the far side of the bridge, headlights cutting through the gloom. I couldn't stay here. Abandoning the dead cab felt like shedding a skin. I started walking, back towards the city, ignoring the occasional curious glance from passing drivers. Every shadow seemed too long. Every reflection held a potential threat. The sounds of the waking city felt alien, intrusive after the silence. Then the terror. Hours later, after a long dissociative walk and a silent bus ride, I was back at my dingy apartment. I stripped off my wet clothes, leaving them in a pile by the door, and stood under a scalding shower until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the chill that felt like it had sunk into my bones, trying to scrub away the memory of that grating voice. Those empty eyes. I called the depot, reported the cab breakdown on the West End Bridge, mumbled something about electrical failure. No questions asked. Maybe cab 307 had a reputation. I told them I was sick, wouldn't be in for my next shift. Didn't know if I'd be in ever again. Later that day, Sal called. Heard 307 died on the West End, he said, his voice flat, devoid of surprise. Yeah, I replied, my voice hollow. Total electrical failure. Uh-huh. Sal grunted. A pause. You stopped on the bridge, didn't you, Leo? Silence. I didn't answer. Figured. Sal sighed. Saw the tow report. Middle of the damn bridge. Mackie territory. Another pause. You okay, kid? No, I admitted softly. Didn't think so, he said. Rule 3 ain't a suggestion. It's the only thing keeping you separate. You stopped. You looked. You let it know you saw. He sighed again, a heavy, weary sound. Get out, Leo, while you still can. This job, this city, it eats guys like you. Find something else. Go somewhere the rain don't smell like the river bottom. His advice hung in the air after he hung up. Get out. Run again. But where? And would it even matter? I had looked. I had acknowledged. Had I invited something to follow? Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized the gaunt face staring back, the eyes wide with a terror that hadn't faded with the dawn. I saw the future Sal represented. Weary, cynical, haunted. Trapped in an endless loop of night shifts and unspoken horrors. Was that better than becoming like Mackie, lost to the cold and the river? Or Carson, answering a phantom voice? Or Ramirez, just gone that night? Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, every whisper of wind sounded like something else. I kept thinking I smelled lilies, or felt a sudden drop in temperature. Staring out my window at the indifferent city lights, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't drive that cab again. But I had the sickening feeling that quitting the job wouldn't be enough to escape the fares of Veridian City. 6 months. 6 months since I walked away from cab 307, dead on the West End Bridge. 6 months since I'd told the dispatcher I was quitting, effective immediately. 6 months of trying to stitch a normal life back together. I got a warehouse job. Graveyard shift. Irony wasn't lost on me, but the steady, mindless labor under harsh fluorescent lights felt safer than the intimate darkness of the taxi. I moved to a different apartment complex across town, avoided the Docklands, the area around the asylum, the bridges over the river. I sold my car, took the bus, tried to sleep, but Veridian City didn't forget, and neither did its passengers. The haunting wasn't overt. No floating specters or bleeding walls. It was quieter, more insidious. It was the way silence sometimes fell in a crowded room. Just for me, the background noise fading to an unnerving stillness that made my heart pound. It was the flicker of static on screens. TVs, computers, ATMs, sometimes resolving for a split second into a pattern that looked chillingly like a pale face or wide, dark eyes. It was the scent of lilies, faint but unmistakable, catching me off guard in the sterile aisle of a supermarket, or the sharp tang of ozone before a storm that never broke. I'd hear phantom meter clicks when waiting for the bus, catch glimpses of figures waving from street corners late at night. Always, instinctively, checking if it was one hand or two. Sometimes, on the late bus home, I'd feel a sudden, intense cold spot beside me on an empty seat, the hairs on my neck prickling, forcing me to stare rigidly out the window until the feeling passed. I learned, through fragmented posts on obscure online forums, coded messages hidden in discussions about faulty radios or GPS glitches, that I wasn't alone. Other drivers, current and former, from Veridian, and maybe other cities too, spoke of the same rules, the same phenomena, albeit vaguely. They talked about problem fares, cold spots, static whispers, cabs that developed personalities. They mentioned specific routes to avoid, certain dispatch codes that meant trouble. It wasn't just cab 307. It wasn't just me. It was a system, vast and indifferent, woven into the fabric of the city's night. Sal wasn't just a survivor. He was a lifer, someone who'd made a grim peace with navigating the edges of the abyss. The knowledge brought no comfort, only a deeper sense of dread. What was this system for? Was the city feeding something? Or were we just disposable parts in some unseen machine? One particularly bleak November night, waiting for the last bus home after a grueling shift, standing alone at the deserted stop under a flickering orange streetlight, mist swirling around my ankles. I saw it, further down the block, half hidden in the fog near a dark alleyway. A figure, waving, frantically, with both hands. My blood turned to ice. Every instinct screamed to run, turn away, pretend I hadn't seen. Rule 1, even now. Off the job, the rules were ingrained. But then the figure stepped further into the light. It wasn't indistinct. It wasn't a phantom. It looked like me, or a version of me. Gaunt, pale, clothes torn, eyes wide with desperate terror, waving both hands in that specific forbidden gesture. I stared, frozen, as a Veridian City cab pulled up beside the figure. Not 307, but another one, equally battered. The back door opened. The back door opened. The figure scrambled inside. The cab pulled away smoothly, disappearing into the mist. I stood there, shaking, long after the bus arrived. Was that my future? Had stopping on the bridge marked me so deeply that a part of me was now trapped out here, forever hailing a ride I could never truly leave? Was I doomed to become another urban legend, another phantom fare? I finally got on the bus, sinking into a seat, ignoring the driver's curious look. I didn't know the answers. All I knew was that I had left the taxi, but the night shift and the things that moved within it hadn't entirely left me. Every shadow, every flicker of static, every moment of silence was a reminder. Driving the city at night, you pick up all sorts. Some are just going home. Some are running away. And some aren't really looking for a ride at all. They're looking for a way in or a way out. And sometimes the fare is you. You just don't know it until it's too late to cancel the ride. The meter is always running. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to like the video. Share it with someone who loves a good scare. And subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules for more terrifying tales just like this. Got your own creepy experience? Or maybe a rule you never break after dark? Drop it in the comments below. I read everyone. New horror drops every week, so turn on the bell icon and join our growing community of night dwellers. You survived this ride, but the next story might be about you.